The first warning. It was an ordinary day on Earth, or so it seemed. The sun shone brightly over the blue oceans and vast green lands as the hustle and bustle of life carried on. People went about their daily routines, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. In the heart of the United Nations, world leaders gathered for a meeting, discussing economic matters and global peace. But that peace was shattered by a single event. It started with a strange signal, one that no one could understand at first. A low, repetitive hum echoed across the world's most secure communication channels. It wasn't from any human source. Scientists at the Space Research Institute were the first to notice it. They had been monitoring space for years, looking for signals from distant stars or signs of alien life. But this signal was different. It wasn't random noise or the usual space background radiation. It was deliberate. It was a message. The hum turned into a series of sharp digital beeps, followed by words that sent a cold chill down the spine of every scientist who heard them. "We are the Galactic Empire. You are a threat to us. Prepare for your extinction." At first, no one believed it. It sounded like a bad joke or a prank. But the signal didn't stop. It grew stronger, more distinct. It repeated every few minutes, louder and clearer. World leaders and military officials were called to action, scrambling to understand the meaning behind the message. Dr. Emily Roth, a lead scientist at the Institute, was the first to translate the cryptic words. "It's a warning," she said, her voice trembling. "They're coming." The room went silent. The world had never experienced anything like this before. The idea of an alien empire threatening Earth seemed impossible, a concept fit only for science fiction. But the evidence was irrefutable. The signal was real. And it wasn't coming from a distant star. No, it was coming from deep within the galaxy, from a place much closer than anyone had anticipated. The Galactic Empire was not just a myth. It was real, and it was on its way. World leaders quickly came together to form a global response. The United Nations issued an emergency broadcast, urging every nation to prepare for the worst. Across the world, military forces began mobilizing, but it was clear that Earth was not ready for what was coming. The Galactic Empire's ships were rumored to be massive, far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. In every major city, the sky was filled with a tense quiet, as people tried to process the unimaginable. Some still didn't believe it. "It's a hoax," they said. "A computer glitch or some sort of prank." But no one could ignore the strange phenomenon that followed the message. The sky was filled with unusual lights, bright streaks that moved too quickly to be ordinary aircraft. Even the most advanced telescopes and satellites couldn't track them. Something was happening. Something big. The Empire's message didn't stop. It repeated every hour, getting more forceful and terrifying each time. "We are the Galactic Empire. We are coming. You cannot stop us." Panic began to spread. People tried to make sense of what was happening. News channels aired non-stop reports, showing live footage of strange phenomena in the sky. Astronomers across the world tracked the unusual lights, but none of their calculations could explain what they were seeing. It was as if a massive fleet was headed straight for Earth. The idea of a galactic empire with the power to wipe out entire civilizations seemed too far-fetched to be real. But the evidence kept mounting. In Washington, D.C., President Jonathan Harris stood before a large screen, watching the data pour in. His hands trembled as he reviewed the calculations. The scientists were in agreement. The empire was coming, and they were coming fast. "This is not a drill," he said, his voice grave. "This is real." The situation became more dire by the minute. With no time to waste, Earth's military leaders convened in an emergency meeting. Plans were drawn up, weapons were readied, and armies were mobilized. But no one knew exactly what to do. How could you fight something that was unknown, something that came from beyond the stars? The one thing everyone agreed on was that Earth had no choice but to prepare for war. Meanwhile, far away in the depths of space, The fleet of the Galactic Empire drew closer. It was a fleet unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Hundreds of massive ships, each one the size of a city, traveled through the cold void of space. They were perfect in their design, sleek, powerful, and deadly. Each ship was armed with weapons capable of annihilating entire planets. On board the flagship of the Empire, Emperor Korath stood in his command center, watching as the planet Earth came into view on his massive screen. His expression was cold and calculating. He had given the order, and now there was no turning back. "Earth will be ours," he muttered under his breath. "Their time is over." Back on Earth, the world was in turmoil. People tried to go about their normal lives, but nothing felt normal anymore. Fear hung in the air. Soldiers moved into strategic positions, scientists worked around the clock to develop weapons, and civilians gathered in shelters, praying for safety. Everyone knew that something catastrophic was coming, but no one knew what to expect. As the hours passed, humanity held its breath. The Galactic Empire had delivered its warning. The question now was, would Earth be able to defend itself, or would the mysterious, unstoppable force of the Empire crush them without mercy? The first contact had been made, and with it came the realization that the battle for Earth's survival had just begun. Earth's counterstrike. The shock of the Galactic Empire's message still echoed in the minds of Earth's leaders. The first few days after the warning were filled with chaos. Governments scrambled to form alliances, military forces mobilized, and entire cities prepared for the worst. Yet, despite the overwhelming sense of panic, something extraordinary was happening. Humanity's response began to take shape. As the days passed, fear started turning into something more powerful: determination. Scientists and military experts worked around the clock, pooling their knowledge and resources. The Global Security Council held emergency meetings, and every nation put aside their differences. The Earth had one goal now: survival. The message from the Galactic Empire had been clear, and no one doubted its gravity. If Earth didn't act fast, the consequences would be devastating. While many had hoped for some miracle that would make the threat vanish, the reality was far more stark. Earth was no longer the undisputed ruler of its own destiny. The Empire's ships were already making their way toward the planet, and with each passing hour, humanity's hope seemed to dwindle. Yet, in the face of insurmountable odds, humans began to realize something crucial. While they may not have the technology of the Empire, they had something just as powerful: ingenuity. At the heart of Earth's response was a woman who had been working for years in a secluded lab, studying alien technology from past encounters with strange objects that had crashed into Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Emily Roth, who had played a pivotal role in deciphering the first warning from the Empire, now turned her attention to developing a weapon that might give Earth a fighting chance. Dr. Roth's team worked day and night, using every resource they had. They repurposed old spacecraft, using reverse engineering to build weapons out of materials that had once been deemed outdated. Earth's military, which had never seen such an urgent need, began to focus on making these makeshift warships capable of surviving an Empire invasion. Each ship was designed with unique defensive systems, including cloaking technologies and electromagnetic fields that could potentially disrupt the Empire's advanced weaponry. The pressure was mounting. With each passing day, the Empire's fleet grew closer, their shadow looming over Earth. As the world waited, scientists made an alarming discovery. The Empire's ships were not only large, but their weaponry was capable of wiping out entire cities in a single strike. Earth's cities were far too fragile to withstand such a force. But then, just as the leaders were beginning to lose hope, Dr. Roth unveiled her crowning achievement: the Defiant Project. It was an artificial intelligence, an AI-driven warship that could think, adapt, and respond faster than any human pilot. Unlike other warships that relied on traditional computing, this AI was designed to analyze, predict, and counter the Empire's strategies in real time. The Defiant Project was a gamble. There had been no tests, no guarantees that the ship would function as intended. But Dr. Roth, standing in front of the massive AI core, knew that humanity's last hope rested on this technology. The project was the culmination of decades of research, pulling together the best minds on Earth to create something that might just be able to stand up to the Empire's might. Across the world, as preparations continued, the atmosphere was thick with fear and anticipation. Ordinary people, who had never even imagined facing an alien invasion, were now being trained in basic survival techniques. Nations scrambled to build shelters deep underground, and bunkers were reinforced to withstand the incoming onslaught. News outlets broadcasted non-stop coverage of the Empire's approach, warning the population about the gravity of the situation. In military command centers, generals and strategists formulated every possible plan to defend Earth. At first, it had been all about sheer numbers. More warships, more fighters, more missiles. But then came the realization. This wasn't just about firepower. It was about intelligence, speed, and adaptability. If Earth was to survive, it needed to outthink the Empire, not just outgun them. Earth's response was far from perfect. The warships built were rudimentary compared to the Empire's sleek, indestructible vessels, but they had been designed with a key advantage. They were unpredictable. The military leaders knew that they couldn't just meet the Empire in a straight-up fight. They needed to create chaos, to keep the invaders guessing. They needed to make them underestimate the power of humanity's resourcefulness. In the command centers of Earth's military, Admiral Jackson was given control of the first unified fleet. He was a veteran, an expert in naval strategy, and the most qualified to lead humanity's first defense against an unknown enemy. His face, usually calm and composed, now showed signs of exhaustion and worry. Every decision he made could determine the survival of billions. "Prepare for the worst," he told his officers. "We've got one chance to strike back, and I'll be damned if we don't make it count." The first stage of the counterstrike was a series of reconnaissance missions. A small fleet of Earth's warships, cloaked and equipped with advanced stealth systems, ventured out into the path of the approaching Empire's fleet. The mission was risky, and if the humans were discovered, it could mean their immediate destruction. But this was their only chance to learn more about the Empire's movements and weaknesses. As the human ships quietly glided into the outer reaches of the solar system, they began to observe the Empire's fleet. The sight of those massive ships, stretching for miles, was enough to make any soldier feel small. Yet the humans pressed on. They used their eye-driven technology to gather as much data as possible. The Empire, vast and seemingly unstoppable, had its own weaknesses. Its ships relied heavily on a central command system. A single blow to the fleet's leader could throw the entire invasion into chaos. The humans knew this was their opening. They didn't have the firepower to take down the Empire's fleet directly, but they had something just as important: knowledge. Armed with this newfound information, they began to strategize. The plan was simple: attack the Empire's flagship, cripple its command center, and disrupt their entire fleet. The countdown to humanity's counterstrike had begun. As Earth's forces prepared for battle, the fate of the planet rested on one crucial question. Would their determination, ingenuity, and quick thinking be enough to turn the tide against the Empire's overwhelming power? Earth was ready to fight back, but the true test was just about to begin. The first encounter. The quiet of space was interrupted only by the hum of Earth's warships as they prepared for their first face-to-face encounter with the mighty fleet of the Galactic Empire. The days of waiting had taken their toll on Earth's military forces. Nerves were frayed, morale wavering under the pressure of what was to come. But in those final hours before the confrontation, something remarkable happened. Humanity found its courage. The fleet had gathered. A mix of makeshift warships, AI-driven stealth ships, and military-grade fighters stood ready to defend their home. On the flagship Defiant, Admiral Jackson surveyed the scene. His face was as calm as ever, but deep within, he understood the gravity of what this moment meant. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was the first chance Earth had to prove it could stand against the might of the Galactic Empire. The enemy was not just an alien force, it was an invader, a force that threatened the existence of everything humanity had ever known. "We've trained for this moment," Admiral Jackson said, his voice steady over the comms. "Let's show them what humanity is made of." A deep silence fell over the fleet as they positioned themselves within striking range of the Empire's advanced warships. The Empire's fleet was enormous, stretching across the stars like a dark wave about to crash on the shores of Earth. Each ship was a towering fortress of metal, with weapons that could wipe out entire planets. But humanity had one thing the Empire didn't: a fierce determination to protect their home. The first human ships moved forward with calculated precision, cloaked in the void of space. The plan was simple: strike fast, hit hard, and vanish before the enemy could react. The Empire had made a crucial mistake. They underestimated humanity's ability to think on its feet. In the Empire's eyes, Earth's forces were weak, mere insects beneath the weight of their superior technology. But they didn't account for Earth's most powerful weapon: creativity. As the human ships advanced, the Empire's sensors picked up something unusual. The human fleet wasn't acting like any conventional army. They didn't advance in one large wave, but in scattered, almost erratic patterns. This forced the Empire to stretch its resources thin, trying to figure out how to respond to this unexpected tactic. It wasn't a full-on assault. They were testing the waters. The first shot came not from the humans, but from the Empire. A massive beam of energy fired from one of the Empire's warships, cutting through space with terrifying precision. It obliterated a decoy ship in an instant, a ship designed to distract and mislead the Empire's scanners. The humans knew the Empire was watching closely, trying to read their next move. This was the beginning of the real battle. Admiral Jackson's voice rang out over the fleet. "Prepare to engage. Let's make this count." In an instant, Earth's warships sprang into action. Missiles and energy beams shot from the human fleet, cutting through the vacuum of space toward their targets. The Empire's ships were powerful, but the humans had a plan: use speed and surprise to keep the enemy off balance. The first collision was a violent shockwave. A human fighter ship, small and agile, darted around the massive Empire ships like a wasp, launching a payload of missiles straight into one of the Empire's flanking vessels. The missile strike, though small compared to the Empire's weapons, did just enough damage to cripple the ship's communication systems. It sent the Empire's forces into a brief state of confusion. It was only for a few moments, but it was enough to give the humans an edge. Human pilots, who had been training relentlessly for this very moment, fought with unmatched ferocity. The Empire's ships were formidable, but the humans were determined to stay unpredictable. With each strike, each new maneuver, they kept the Empire guessing. The galaxy's mightiest fleet couldn't track them fast enough. It was the humans' greatest advantage. While the Empire relied on overwhelming strength and numbers, the humans relied on their ability to adapt in real time. Meanwhile, aboard the Defiant, Dr. Roth's AI warship, designed for exactly this kind of scenario, was engaged in its own battle. The AI, which had been built to think faster than any human ever could, calculated the next move with near-perfect precision. It tracked the movements of the Empire's flagship, the heart of the invasion force, and found a small weakness in the ship's defensive shields. The AI's algorithms had been designed to adapt, to find the flaws in the Empire's seemingly flawless machines, and it had found one. Targeting the flagship's weak point, the AI's voice echoed over the comms, its tone almost emotionless. The warship fired a single, powerful beam directly at the Empire's flagship, striking its shields at the exact point of vulnerability. The damage wasn't enough to destroy the ship, but it was enough to send a clear message: humanity was not going down without a fight. But the Empire was not easily defeated. Within moments, the Empire retaliated. Their counterattack came swiftly, and their firepower was overwhelming. Massive energy blasts streaked through the void of space, turning parts of the battlefield into fiery chaos. A human warship, one of the few with a direct line of defense, was struck by one of these blasts. The ship's hull crumpled under the impact, and it spiraled out of control, its crew lost in an instant. The humans had suffered their first casualty. The cost of war was real, and it was brutal. Yet even in the face of such destruction, humanity's resolve did not falter. Another human ship, the Vanguard, maneuvered into position and launched a flurry of torpedoes. The explosion rocked the Empire's second-largest ship, sending it into a spin. The Empire was reeling, and for a brief moment, the human forces gained the upper hand. However, the Empire was vast and relentless. They began to regroup, calling reinforcements from deeper in the fleet. It became clear that this initial skirmish, though hard-fought, was only the beginning. Earth's forces had succeeded in slowing the Empire's progress, but the battle was far from over. The Empire's ships continued to push forward, their power in numbers overwhelming. But humanity wasn't finished yet. The first encounter had proven something crucial. While Earth's fleet was small, its spirit was unbreakable. The humans had shown the Empire they weren't helpless, that they could fight back. The battle was far from decided, and as the dust settled, both sides knew this was just the opening move in a far longer war. The question now was, how far would Earth go to protect itself? Would the human race endure, or would this be their last stand against an unstoppable force? The Empire's next move would determine the fate of the entire planet. The stakes had never been higher. The shifting tide. The silence of space between the two opposing fleets was deafening. The battle was far from over, but Earth's forces had made an unexpected statement. They were not to be underestimated. The first encounter had sent ripples through both fleets, and the Galactic Empire was no longer as certain of their inevitable victory. For the humans, the initial success had breathed new life into their efforts. They had struck the Empire, and though the damage had been minimal, the psychological effect was immense. It had proven to both sides that Earth wasn't willing to give up its home without a fierce struggle. In the aftermath of the initial clash, the humans were forced to regroup. Their warships, though relatively advanced, had sustained damage, and their numbers were far fewer than the Empire's. The cost of their first skirmish had been high, but it was nothing compared to what was to come. The Empire, far from retreating, was calling in reinforcements, a vast fleet of warships that would dwarf anything humanity had at its disposal. Admiral Jackson, still in command aboard the Defiant, had expected the Empire to respond with fury. But what he didn't expect was the calmness in their approach. The Empire was not just a fleet. It was an empire that had crushed countless civilizations over centuries. They weren't rushing in. They were studying Earth's tactics, preparing for a long, drawn-out war. The initial wave of shock and surprise had passed, and now the Empire was ready to make its move. "We need to keep them off balance," Admiral Jackson said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "We've made them question their superiority, but it won't last. We need to strike again, fast and hard, before they can regroup." Dr. Roth, still working on the Defiant, had been analyzing the data collected from the first encounter. She had a troubling realization. The Empire was learning too. They were beginning to adapt to the humans' tactics, and they had the resources to outlast Earth. The human fleet was strong, but it was not infinite. She quickly began working on an upgrade to the Defiant, hoping to give the ship an edge. The AI, still operating with a relentless focus, analyzed the incoming fleet and began running simulations. The future of Earth depended on getting this upgrade right. Meanwhile, the Empire's fleet, led by the imposing flagship Erebus, had begun to maneuver into position, preparing for a full-scale assault. The Erebus was a symbol of the Empire's might, an indomitable fortress in space, bristling with weapons capable of turning entire planets to dust. It had been designed for one purpose: to crush worlds that dared resist the Empire. The flagship's captain, General Zorith, was a seasoned veteran of countless conquests. His eyes were cold, his mind sharp, as he surveyed the battle from his command deck. "Activate the suppressor beams," General Zoreth commanded. "We will make them feel the weight of the Empire's might. No more distractions. End this now." The suppressor beams were a new weapon, one that the humans had not encountered in their initial battle. These beams were capable of disrupting communications, disabling electronic systems, and even rendering entire fleets blind to their surroundings. The Empire intended to disable Earth's ability to retaliate before delivering a killing blow. Admiral Jackson knew that Earth's forces had to keep their momentum, but the enemy's new weapon was a grave concern. He called an emergency meeting with his top commanders aboard the Defiant. They couldn't afford another misstep. They had to be smarter, faster, and more unpredictable than ever. "If they deploy the suppressor beams, we'll be blind," said General Marcus, the fleet's tactical officer. "We'll have no communication, no control over our ships. We could lose everything in seconds." Jackson nodded, his mind racing. "We can't let that happen. We need to disable the suppressors before they get the chance to use them. The Defiant is our best bet, but we'll need a decoy, something to draw their fire." The plan was set in motion. The Defiant, with its upgraded AI system, would be the primary force to attack the Erebus. Meanwhile, a small group of stealth ships would make a daring attack on the Empire's secondary vessels, causing enough of a distraction to keep the Empire's fleet divided. As the human ships moved into position, the Empire's suppressor beams began to power up, their ominous hums signaling that the next phase of the battle was about to begin. The Erebus was ready to unleash its devastating weaponry. General Zoreth, confident in the Empire's superior technology, gave the order to fire. The beams shot out, cutting through the emptiness of space like a hot knife through butter. The first wave of Earth's ships, still relying on conventional communication, felt the brunt of the attack. Within moments, entire fleets were crippled. The suppressor beams hit their mark. Communication systems went dark, navigation controls malfunctioned, and several ships spiraled out of control, helpless in the vacuum of space. But Earth wasn't finished yet. The Defiant, with its AI-driven systems, was not affected by the suppressor beams. Its communication and navigation systems were independent, functioning through advanced algorithms that the Empire had never seen. As the Defiant surged forward, it fired its newly upgraded weapons, high-powered pulses designed to disrupt the Empire's suppressors. The Empire's shields flickered for a moment, as the Defiant's shots hit their target. "This is it," Admiral Jackson muttered under his breath, watching as the energy from the Defiant slammed into the Erebus's defenses. The battle had reached its critical moment. The Erebus's shields sparked violently as the AI calculated the optimal point of attack, analyzing the ship's structure in real time. Within seconds, the Defiant's AI fired again, this time striking the Empire flagship's central power core. The Empire's flagship shuddered, as if feeling the first taste of defeat. General Zoreth was caught off guard. What in the stars? How is this possible? His eyes widened as the systems of the Erebus began to fail, not enough to bring the mighty ship down, but enough to give Earth's forces a fighting chance. But the Empire was far from broken. A new wave of reinforcements, larger, more powerful, emerged from behind the Erebus, launching a coordinated counterattack. The battle escalated into a chaotic storm of energy blasts, missiles, and evasive maneuvers as Earth's forces fought desperately to maintain the upper hand. The Empire, shaken by the Defiant's assault, realized something they hadn't anticipated. Earth's forces were not simply desperate. They were resourceful, adaptable, and willing to fight with everything they had. The Galactic Empire had faced countless civilizations before, but none had ever responded quite like this. As Earth's fleet engaged in this fierce clash, something remarkable was happening. The human forces, pushed to their limits, had started to change the dynamics of the war. They were no longer just reacting to the Empire's movements. They were now forcing the Empire to adjust to their tactics. Earth's will to survive, to protect their home, was becoming an increasingly formidable weapon. But as the battle raged on, one thing was certain. The war was far from over. Both sides were locked in a deadly game, and the stakes had never been higher. The Empire strikes back. The battle between Earth's fledgling fleet and the vast might of the Galactic Empire had reached a critical point. Both sides were locked in a deadly struggle, neither willing to give in. The Empire, though shaken by Earth's unexpected resistance, had begun to regroup, sending in reinforcements from every corner of their galaxy-spanning domain. The sheer scale of their forces dwarfed anything humanity could hope to field, but Earth's forces weren't about to back down. Admiral Jackson stood at the heart of the Defiant, his face grim as he watched the Empire's ships take position. The Empire had begun to employ a new strategy, one that involved targeting Earth's vulnerable supply lines. They knew that Earth's fleet was not infinite. The longer this war dragged on, the fewer ships Earth could afford to lose. The Empire's new plan was clear: isolate humanity's resources, sever their supply routes, and force Earth to surrender by starving their fleet of the necessary fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. "We have to hit them first," Jackson muttered under his breath. "If we don't disrupt their supply chains, this war will be over before we know it." Jackson's words were met with a series of nods from his command staff. There was no time to waste. Earth's forces had already suffered significant losses, and their numbers were dwindling fast. The Empire had the upper hand in terms of firepower, but humanity's resourcefulness was becoming their greatest weapon. "We have to attack now, before they can deploy those supply ships," Jackson continued, his voice steady but urgent. "We'll take out their fuel depots and make sure they can't reinforce themselves. If we can cripple their logistics, we'll cripple their ability to fight." The human fleet, though outnumbered and outgunned, was beginning to learn the true meaning of warfare. It was no longer just about overwhelming firepower. It was about strategy, precision, and knowing when to strike. The Defiant, the flagship of the human fleet, would lead the charge, drawing the Empire's attention while the smaller, more agile ships moved in to sabotage their supply ships. As the battle raged on, the Empire's fleet split into two main sections. One continued to engage Earth's forces in a direct assault, while the other veered off to the outer edges of the battlefield, hidden in the darkness of space. Admiral Jackson knew exactly where they were headed. The Empire's fuel depots, hidden in a nearby asteroid field, were a critical lifeline for the Empire's massive war machine. "We have one shot at this," Jackson said, his voice unwavering. "We can't afford to miss. We need to take out their supply lines, or this will be our last fight." The Defiant led the charge, its eye-guided systems calculating the fastest and most efficient path toward the Empire's fuel depots. The human fleet moved with precision, their ships darting through the void of space, dodging enemy fire as they pushed forward. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance at slowing the Empire's relentless advance. Meanwhile, General Zoreth, aboard the Erebus, was growing increasingly frustrated. His initial confidence had been shaken. The humans were proving to be a far more formidable opponent than he had ever expected. They weren't just fighting. They were forcing him to adapt, something the Empire had not had to do in centuries. He had to admit, Earth's unpredictable tactics were starting to make him question the Empire's superiority. "They are heading for the supply lines," one of Zoreth's officers reported. "Shall we pursue, sir?" Zoreth's eyes narrowed. The humans were playing a dangerous game, but he wasn't about to let them succeed. "Deploy the full fleet. We cannot let them cripple our resources. Set a course to intercept them. This ends now." The Empire's response was swift and decisive. The Erebus moved to engage, leading a group of warships toward the asteroid field where the human fleet had gone. The immense size of the Erebus cast a shadow over the smaller ships that had been dispatched to sabotage the Empire's supply depots. Zoreth knew that if he could eliminate the human strike force, he could force Earth into submission. But the humans had one advantage. They were already in position. As Earth's ships closed in on the asteroid field, the tension grew unbearable. Every sensor was on high alert, scanning for any sign of the Empire's reinforcements. The Empire was relentless, their ships firing on anything that moved, hoping to wipe out humanity's strike force before it could do any real damage. But Earth's ships were fast and nimble, darting between the asteroids, weaving in and out of the field like ghosts. The human fleet's first target was a heavily guarded fuel depot located on the edge of the asteroid belt. The humans launched a series of coordinated attacks, bombarding the depot with a mix of missile strikes and precision energy pulses. The depot shuddered under the barrage, and explosions rang out as the fuel reserves were ignited, sending a massive fireball into space. "Direct hit," Dr. Roth reported, her voice filled with cold satisfaction. "One down, but we need to move fast. The Empire is closing in." The explosion sent shockwaves through the battlefield, catching the attention of Zorath and his fleet. The Erebus, now at the forefront of the Empire's counterattack, fired its massive energy cannons, cutting through the asteroid field like a scythe through wheat. Earth's ships scattered, evading the blasts, but their position was now compromised. The Empire had found them. "Target their ships. Do not let them escape," Zorath barked, his eyes burning with anger. The battle intensified. The Empire's fleet closed in, surrounding the human strike force from all sides. Earth's ships, despite their advanced tactics, were vastly outnumbered. But the humans refused to surrender. They fought with everything they had, using the asteroids as cover, launching ambushes, and doing whatever they could to stay one step ahead of the Empire's overwhelming firepower. On the Defiant, Admiral Jackson watched as his ships began to fall back. The Empire's forces were closing in too fast, their sheer numbers overwhelming. But Jackson knew there was no turning back now. The humans had struck a blow to the Empire's resources, and that blow had not gone unnoticed. "This isn't over," Jackson said, staring at the chaos unfolding on the view screen. "We've hit them where it hurts. They may have the upper hand in firepower, but they won't have the fuel to keep fighting forever." And though the Empire was winning the battle for now, Jackson knew that Earth had made its mark. The Empire had underestimated humanity, but with every strike, every victory, Earth's forces had shown that they were capable of more than just survival. They were capable of forcing the Empire to think twice. The battle for Earth was far from over. The Empire had the numbers, the power, and the ships to crush Earth's resistance. But the humans had one thing the Empire could never understand: an unyielding will to protect their home. The war was escalating, but in the back of Jackson's mind, one thought kept pushing him forward. This was far from the final chapter. The real fight had just begun. The last stand. The tension in space was palpable, thick enough to be felt in every corner of Earth's fleet. The battle had dragged on for days, the weight of it settling heavily on the shoulders of those who had made this stand possible. Humanity had struck deep into the heart of the Empire's supply lines, dealing a devastating blow to the galactic war machine. But the Empire, as ever, was unyielding. Earth's resistance had ignited a fury in the Empire, and now they had mobilized their full strength, a force that could overwhelm anything Earth had left. Admiral Jackson stood at the command deck of the Defiant, the very heart of humanity's war effort. His face was drawn, his mind tired from the constant strain, but there was something else in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. It was determination, sharpened by the bitter reality that Earth's survival depended on this moment. "Admiral," Dr. Roth called, her voice tight with urgency. "The Empire's fleet is moving into position. They're not just attacking, they're surrounding us." Jackson didn't respond immediately. He stared at the holomap of space displayed before him, taking in the lines of red that represented the Empire's warships. Their formation was no accident. Zorath was out for blood. The Empire's fleet had encircled Earth's forces, cutting off any chance of retreat. This was it, humanity's last chance to fight. "This is the endgame," Jackson muttered. We can't run. We can't retreat. We stand and fight. His words were not just an order. They were a declaration of everything humanity stood for. There was no surrender in the hearts of the humans who had made it this far. They had chosen to fight, and they would die fighting if it came to that. Earth had been backed into a corner, but in every corner, in every heart, there was still the spark of hope. On the battlefield, the human fleet was a shadow of its former strength. The relentless empire had worn them down, ship by ship, and the few that remained were battered and bruised. Their ammunition was running low, their shields were failing, and many of their ships were adrift, damaged beyond repair. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's resolve remained unbroken. Admiral Jackson paced, his mind working through their options. He had always believed in the strategy of unpredictability, of doing the unexpected, making the enemy second-guess every move. But even the best strategies had their limits. The Empire was ruthless, their technology superior, and their fleet vast. He needed a way to buy more time, to give Earth's forces a chance to hit the Empire one more time before it was all over. "Bring me the tactical team," he ordered, his voice steady, though the weight of his responsibility was crushing. "I need a plan." Moments later, the team gathered around him in the war room. There was little to be said. They all knew the stakes, but there was one thing they had learned from their countless battles with the Empire. They were not going down without a fight. "Admiral, we've analyzed the Empire's movements," General Marcus said, his voice grim. "Zorath's fleet is poised for a direct assault on Earth's main defense perimeter. They're launching everything they've got." "We can't stop them head-on," Jackson replied, his voice low. "But we can slow them down. We still have one thing the Empire doesn't expect." Dr. Roth's eyes narrowed, as if she understood where he was going. "You're talking about the prototype, the weapon we've been developing." "Yes," Jackson confirmed. "It's a last-ditch weapon. It's not fully tested, but it's our only chance to disrupt the Erebus long enough for the rest of the fleet to reposition." The prototype was a gamble, a weapon designed to generate a destabilizing pulse that could disrupt the energy systems of the Empire's flagship, the Erebus. It was still in the experimental stages, and it had never been tested in live combat. But if it worked, it would give Earth's forces a fleeting opportunity to shift the tide of the battle. "If we don't act now, it'll be too late," Jackson said, his mind racing. "We deploy the pulse at the heart of the Erebus. We may only have one shot at it, but we have to take it." The decision was made. There was no turning back. As Earth's remaining warships spread out to create a thin line of defense against the advancing Empire, the Defiant broke formation, moving toward the Erebus with precision. The Defiant's crew had become accustomed to fighting in the most dire of circumstances. They had faced overwhelming odds before, and they had come out victorious. But this time, the battle felt different. There was an eerie quiet to space now, a silence that settled deep into the bones of every crew member, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The Defiant moved quickly, its engines pushing it forward with all the power it could muster. But it wasn't just speed they needed, it was precision. As they drew closer to the Empire's flagship, the pulse weapon was primed. It was a piece of cutting-edge technology, designed to short-circuit the enemy's energy systems, something the Empire had never seen before. "Brace yourselves," Admiral Jackson said, his voice steady, though the stakes could not have been higher. "Once we're in range, there's no turning back." The ship shuddered as they made their final approach, and Jackson felt a pang of doubt. Was this the right decision? But there was no time for hesitation. He had committed to this course of action, and the fate of Earth's future rested on its success. In the distance, the Erebus loomed, massive, imposing, and brimming with firepower. Zorath, aboard his flagship, was too focused on the battle unfolding around him to notice the Defiant's approach. His fleet was making its final push toward Earth, determined to crush humanity once and for all. But the Defiant had one last card to play. "Fire the pulse," Jackson commanded, his eyes locked onto the view screen. The hum of energy surged through the ship as the prototype weapon activated. The air in the command room seemed to grow colder, the tension rising as the weapon was deployed. A brilliant wave of energy surged from the Defiant, rocketing toward the Erebus. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The pulse hit the Erebus with a devastating impact, sending shockwaves through its massive frame. Systems on the Empire's flagship sputtered and flickered. The enormous ship shuddered as its energy systems went haywire, its once impenetrable shields dropping. It was only for a few seconds, but in the chaos, Earth's forces seized their moment. Now, Jackson barked, and the rest of the human fleet surged forward, launching a barrage of missiles and energy blasts at the stunned Erebus. But it wasn't enough. The Empire had learned from their past mistakes, and even as the Erebus struggled to regain control, the reinforcements were already closing in. The Defiant and its fleet weren't out of danger yet. The Empire was furious, its entire fleet turning its attention to Earth's remaining ships. But the Defiant strike had bought Earth a moment, a fleeting, fragile moment. And in that moment, humanity stood firm. The battle was far from over, but humanity had sent a message the Empire couldn't ignore. Earth would fight, not just for survival, but for victory. And no matter how powerful the Empire was, they were not invincible. The final hour. The stars outside the viewing port seemed distant now, almost as if they were watching, silent witnesses to the greatest struggle in the galaxy. The battle had raged for days, and humanity had already lost so much. Yet there was still a glimmer of hope in the eyes of the surviving crew aboard Earth's fleet. They had defied the odds at every turn, and though they were battered, bruised, and outnumbered, they weren't going down without making the Empire regret every move they'd made. Admiral Jackson stood on the command deck of the Defiant, the epicenter of the resistance. His face was worn, the lines of age and stress taking their toll, but there was a fire in his eyes, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished no matter how dark things seemed. "Admiral," General Marcus said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the situation. "We've lost almost half our fleet. The Empire has brought in more ships. If we don't act now, we're done for." The message was clear. Earth's forces couldn't afford another prolonged engagement. The Erebus had regained control of its systems, and with the Empire's reinforcements, they were closing in fast. The Defiant and its remaining fleet were running out of time. Jackson had always known this moment would come, the final hour when everything they had fought for would either break or solidify into history. He had spent every moment of his life as an officer preparing for this, but nothing could prepare him for the sheer weight of this choice. "We don't have much left to work with," Jackson said quietly, glancing around at his weary crew. "But we're going to make one last push. This is it." The plan was risky, insanely so, but Jackson knew it was their only chance. Earth had no more ships left to lose, no more reinforcements to call in. The Empire, with all its vastness and power, had underestimated one thing: the heart of humanity. Earth's resistance wasn't just about military might. It was about the resolve, the determination, the sheer will to protect their home. And that would be their weapon now. Jackson gathered the remaining commanders for a final briefing. Their goal was simple: launch a daring assault directly at the heart of the Erebus, the symbol of the Empire's might. They would draw the Empire's attention, give their fleet one final burst of firepower, and hit the Erebus with everything they had. If they could take down the flagship, they could destroy the Empire's central command. And that would cripple the entire war effort. It was a suicide mission. "We won't get a second chance," Jackson said to the gathered commanders, his voice resolute. "But if we succeed, it will change everything. The Empire's flagship is their strength. Without it, they'll have no direction. They'll lose their command structure." "Understood," General Marcus said, his jaw tight with determination. "We'll follow your lead, sir. We'll fight to the end." The Defiant led the charge, pushing its remaining engines to their limits as it rocketed toward the Erebus. The surrounding ships, battered but still functional, fell into formation, creating a wall of firepower that would allow Jackson's ship to break through the enemy lines. The Erebus, with its massive frame and imposing presence, loomed ahead, an insurmountable force that seemed invincible. But to Earth's remaining fleet, it wasn't a ship, it was a symbol of everything the Empire had thrown at them. And it was a symbol they were ready to destroy. As they drew closer, Jackson could feel the tension in the air. Every ship in the fleet was making its final move, each crew member knowing that they might never see the stars again. The Defiant's shields were barely holding up, its engines sputtering from the constant strain. The Erebus's weapons were locked onto them, preparing to fire, ready to turn the Defiant into space debris. But Jackson wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid of death or the Empire. He was afraid of leaving a world unprotected. He was afraid of the idea that Earth might lose its place in the universe, that humanity's story might end here. And he would not let that happen. Lock on to their central command core, Jackson ordered. We're going for the heart of the ship. The Defiant's weapons systems hummed to life, targeting the Erebus Central Command Center. But just as they were about to launch their final strike, the Erebus fired. A barrage of energy blasts slammed into the Defiant, the shields flaring as they absorbed the incoming fire. The ship shuddered violently under the assault, and alarms began to blare throughout the vessel. "Shields at 20%, Dr. Roth reported. "We can't take another hit like that." Jackson gritted his teeth. They couldn't afford to slow down now. The Defiant's weapons locked on to their target once again. "Launch the missile barrage now," Jackson commanded. The missile shot from the Defiant, racing toward the Erebus in a stream of fiery trails. The impact was immediate, a massive explosion that rocked the Empire's flagship. But even as the Erebus staggered from the blast, the Empire retaliated with a fury that was nothing short of brutal. The human fleet was decimated, ships falling one by one, their lights flickering out of existence in a symphony of death. The Defiant held its course, pushing forward, determined to land the final blow. "We're in range," Jackson said, his voice tight with resolve. "All hands, prepare for impact." And then, in one final, desperate push, the Defiant launched its most powerful weapon, the pulse generator. It had been designed to break through any defense, to shatter even the most powerful energy shields. The massive blast shot from the Defiant, racing toward the Erebus. And in that moment, Jackson felt as though time itself had stopped. The pulse hit the Erebus with a force that seemed to rip the fabric of space itself. The flagship of the Empire trembled violently, its energy systems completely overloaded. Shields flickered and then collapsed, and in the heart of the ship, its core exploded. The Erebus was no more. The Empire's central command had fallen, and with it, the Empire's ability to fight. For a moment, everything was silent. The void of space seemed to hold its breath. Then, as the Empire's remaining ships began to lose cohesion, Earth's surviving forces launched one final coordinated assault. The remaining Empire ships, now without leadership, were easy targets. One by one, they fell. But the battle wasn't over yet. The cost of victory had been steep. Almost every ship in Earth's fleet had been lost. The few that remained were battered and broken. The toll on humanity had been unimaginable. But Earth had won. The Empire's might was shattered, its war effort crushed in a single devastating blow. Admiral Jackson, standing among the ruins of the battlefield, looked at the wreckage of the Erebus, knowing that this moment, this victory, was the moment that would be remembered for centuries. Humanity had fought not just for survival, but for their place in the universe. They had faced an empire that had once seemed invincible, and they had shown it the true strength of Earth. The war was over, and the galaxy would never forget the day that Earth fought back.